It was close to midnight when I first heard the sound. The faint rattle of a key sliding into my front door lock. I froze where I sat, in the corner of my own living room, clutching a mug of cold tea I had forgotten to finish. My heart pounded as the metal scraped, then twisted, again and again. Someone was trying to get in. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, the way grief sometimes plays tricks on your mind when you live alone. But then I saw her face clear as day in the glow of the porch light. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, standing on my front step, purse slung over her shoulder, jaw tight with frustration as the key she held refused to turn. My breath caught in my chest. Melissa, not a stranger, not some thief off the street. My own family. I pressed my back against the wall and let the weight of that realization sink in. The key in her hand was not one I had given her, which meant she had taken it. Somehow, she had found a way to slip into parts of my life that were meant to be mine alone. And here she was, bold as ever, testing my locks like she owned the place. It is a strange kind of betrayal when you see it unfold, not in words, but in silence. I didn't need to hear her speak to know what she was after. My late husband's last gift to me, the home we had poured our dreams into, was suddenly nothing more than a target. To her, I was not a mother, not even a person with feelings, but an obstacle, sitting there in the shadows. I felt my world tilt. Shock turned quickly into something sharper, a disbelief so heavy it nearly crushed me. I had always believed family was a safe place, a circle that would protect me. But in that moment, all I could see was how easily love had been replaced by greed. I should have opened the door and demanded answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was wisdom. Instead, I stayed quiet and let her fumble in the dark, not realizing she was teaching me the truth I needed to see. That night was not the beginning. No, it was only the moment I finally understood. The signs had been there before, hidden in small comments and quiet pressures. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. And that's where the real story begins. When Frank passed away, my world grew unbearably quiet. After 40 years of marriage, the silence in our home was almost physical. I'd retired from the library not long before, thinking I would finally have time to read for pleasure, to cook new recipes, to travel with him. Instead, my days were filled with empty chairs and evenings that stretched too long. The smell of his aftershave lingered in the closet, and I couldn't bring myself to move his jacket from the back of the chair. I told myself I was managing. I went through the motions watering the plants, sorting the mail, even volunteering a little at the community center. But loneliness is a shadow that follows you, even into the brightest rooms. That's when Daniel and Melissa began showing up more often. At first, I thought it was kindness. They brought over takeout dinners, checked in about my health, called in the evenings just to ask how I was. I remember feeling grateful, touched that they seemed to care so deeply. Melissa would pat my hand with that sympathetic smile of hers and remind me that I shouldn't spend too much time alone. Daniel echoed her, saying things like how the house must feel too big now, how maybe I'd be happier somewhere fresh and new. At the time, those words sounded like love. They seemed to worry about me climbing the stairs, about me cooking meals for one, about me waking up in an empty house. Melissa even told me once that Frank would want me to move forward, to find something lighter. I held on to those words as if they were a rope pulling me out of grief. But looking back, I can see how carefully those comments were placed. Each suggestion was wrapped in tenderness, but beneath it was a nudge, a push, a subtle redirection away from my own choices and toward theirs. I didn't see it then. I wanted so badly to believe that their attention was genuine, that my family was circling close because they loved me, not because they saw an opportunity. In those early months, I clung to their presence like a lifeline. I laughed when they teased me about my stubbornness, nodded when they mentioned safety statistics about older women living alone, smiled when they told me I deserved more joy. It felt comforting, almost like a shared grief knitting us together. Only later would I realize those moments were the first threads of something else, entirely a plan I was too trusting to recognize. Still, in the middle of that fog of loss, their visits gave me a sense of belonging. And it was during one of those lonely afternoons, after another gentle reminder from Melissa about how Frank would have wanted me to start fresh, that I stumbled across a listing for a house that stirred something deep inside me. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind where the gray sky makes you feel heavier than usual. I was sipping coffee, flipping through real estate listings on my laptop more out of habit than intent when I saw it. A Victorian house on a quiet street just outside of town. Wraparound porch, tall windows, gables that looked like they belonged in a painting. My heart gave a little jolt, the kind I hadn't felt in a long time. I clicked through the photos slowly, letting each detail sink in. 6 bedrooms, polished hardwood floors, a sweeping staircase that curved like a ribbon. The kitchen had old-fashioned charm with enough room to become the heart of a family. I could almost hear laughter echoing through those rooms. For the first time since Frank's death, I found myself imagining the future instead of replaying the past. It wasn't just a house, it felt like possibility. I remembered being a little girl, walking home from school and passing by big houses like that, telling myself that someday I'd live in one. Life had taken me on a simpler path, small starter homes, then the modest house where Frank and I raised Daniel. That home had been full of love, but this Victorian stirred something different, something I thought I'd left behind, a dream. The asking price was steep, but Frank's life insurance had been sitting untouched, waiting for purpose. He had always told me to use it wisely, to create something lasting. And as I stared at those photos, I thought what could be more lasting than a family home that could hold not only me, but Daniel and Melissa, and maybe even grandchildren someday. So I made a choice, quietly, carefully. I arranged for the purchase through a trust. I didn't tell Daniel or Melissa. Something inside me whispered to keep it close, at least for a while. I hired contractors, asked for fresh paint, a renovated kitchen, a garden planted out back. For 6 weeks, I watched that house transform from worn and tired into something alive again. Every nail hammered, every wall painted, every flower planted felt like a stitch mending the torn fabric of my family. I pictured Daniel's face lighting up when I told him it was his new home. I imagined Melissa's tears of gratitude, the grandchildren running through the hallways, their voices filling the space that had once been silent. It wasn't just a gift of bricks and mortar, it was a chance for all of us to start fresh, together. I told myself this was what Frank would have wanted. He had been a family man to the core, always planning for the next holiday, the next barbecue, The next gathering, this house would be his legacy, carried forward through me. As the final coat of paint dried and the chandelier sparkled above the dining table, I felt a rush of excitement unlike anything I'd known since he passed. Soon, I would gather Daniel and Melissa and reveal everything. Soon, I would hand them this dream, wrapped in love and sacrifice. I had no idea then that my gift would never be received as I intended. The morning of the big reveal, I woke up buzzing with anticipation. I had planned everything carefully, one final walkthrough before showing Daniel and Melissa the house. Then, a celebratory lunch where I would tell them it was theirs. I drove to Elmwood Street with my heart racing like a schoolgirl carrying a secret. But when I turned the corner, I saw something that froze me in place. Daniel's car was already parked out front. And there, on the porch of my house, the house I had poured my soul into, stood Melissa, phone in hand, gesturing toward the garden as if she were presenting it to someone else. I stayed in my car across the street, my hands tightening around the steering wheel. Melissa paced the yard, pointing at windows, talking animatedly about where she would place furniture and how the garden could be rearranged. She walked with the easy confidence of ownership, not curiosity. My stomach twisted. I finally gathered myself and went inside, pretending surprise at finding them there. They greeted me warmly, but it felt staged, as though I had stepped into a play where the parts were already assigned. Melissa swept me into the kitchen, her eyes shining as she ran her hands over the marble counters I had chosen with such care. She spoke of hosting dinner parties and filling the space with laughter, her voice rising with excitement. Then she led me upstairs. I followed, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth that all of this had been my gift, my act of love. But before I could, she paused at the master bedroom door and declared that it would be perfect for her and Daniel. My sanctuary, the room I had dreamed of making my own, was already claimed. She turned casually and said that the smaller room by the guest bathroom would be more than adequate for me. Just a passing remark, tossed like a scrap. A small room for the widow, tucked away in the corner while the young family spread themselves across the best of the house. I smiled faintly, though my chest burned. Adequate. After all the years of sacrifice, of raising Daniel, of standing by him through thick and thin, this was where I was placed in the picture they painted of the future. A guest in the home I had bought, demoted to the margins while they built their lives on the foundation of my love. I wanted to shout, to tear down the illusion right then and there. But something stronger held me back, a need to see how far they would go, how deep this sense of entitlement ran. So I nodded, letting them guide me through the tour of my own house, hiding my heartbreak behind polite smiles. Inside, though, the first cracks of anger began to show, and I knew this was only the beginning. It didn't take long for the pressure to begin. A day after the so-called tour, Daniel called me, his voice carrying that careful tone I knew too well, the one he used when he was trying to convince me of something. He told me another family was already circling the house, ready to make a full cash offer. If we didn't act fast, he warned, we'd lose out. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening as my own son spun lies to create urgency, not realizing the woman he was trying to fool already held the deed in her hands. Melissa joined in, painting her own picture of desperation. She said her parents' health was declining, that they needed space for them to move in, that this house was perfect for their needs, not our needs, hers. And just when I thought I had heard enough, she pulled out the heaviest card of all. She said, "Frank, my husband, would have wanted me to invest in the family's future, that he would have seen this house as an opportunity worth seizing. The audacity of it cut straight through me. To twist Frank's memory into a weapon, to use his name to pry open my heart and my wallet, it was almost too much to bear. I wanted to shout, to confront them, to throw their words back in their faces, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed quiet, letting them believe their performance was working. Outwardly, I nodded and murmured, acting like a woman weighing her options. Inwardly, I was taking note of every manipulation, every twist of the knife cloaked in the language of love. I began to see the pattern clearly: urgency, guilt, and sentiment, woven together like a net designed to trap me. They didn't want my happiness. They wanted my money, my security, my husband's final gift, and they were willing to twist any truth to get it. But I wasn't as fragile as they believed. Behind my polite smiles, my mind was already moving in another direction. If they wanted to play games, then I would let them. I would give them enough space to reveal just how far they were willing to go. I told myself it was time for a test, one that would show me the truth about the people I loved most. And deep down, I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. A few days later, I decided to drive by the house, just to feel that swell of pride again, to remind myself why I was enduring their manipulation in silence. But when I turned onto the street, I stopped cold. Melissa's car was parked right out front. I pulled over at the far end of the block, my hands trembling as I watched her walk around the yard with another woman I didn't recognize. Melissa was gesturing toward the windows, pointing at the porch, circling the garden as though she were the hostess of some private tour. Then I saw the glint of a key in her hand. A key sliding into the lock of my front door. My stomach dropped. She had gained access to my house. Not a house for sale. Not a property open to tours. My home. I sat there, frozen, fury rising in my chest. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was trespassing. This was theft of something far greater than money: my trust, my safety, my dignity. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. Within hours, I had a locksmith changing every lock on that house. I called a security company and arranged for cameras to be installed on every entrance, inside and out. It cost me more than I cared to spend. But at that point, peace of mind was priceless. The next morning, the payoff came. Sitting in the living room, a fresh cup of coffee warming my hands. I watched the security feed on my phone as Melissa approached the front door. She slipped the key in, jiggled it once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Her face twisted with confusion, then irritation. She moved to the back door, tried again, and failed again. I nearly laughed out loud as I watched her gesture angrily, pulling out her phone to call Daniel. For once, I wasn't the one caught off guard. For once, I held the upper hand. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. Real, solid control. And I promised myself I wasn't going to let it go again. When the moment finally came, I didn't ease into it. I had carried the truth long enough. I invited Daniel and Melissa over under the pretense of discussing the offer they were so eager to rush me into. We sat in the very living room they had tried to claim, the walls still carrying the fresh scent of paint I had chosen. I looked at them both, then let the words fall steady and sharp. This is my house. I bought it weeks ago with your father's life insurance. Every decision, every renovation, every dollar it was mine. The silence that followed was thick. Daniel blinked at me, his mouth parting as if he couldn't process what he had heard. Melissa, on the other hand, stiffened instantly, her face twisting with anger. I went on before either of them could speak. I told them how I had watched them circle me like vultures, pressing me with false urgency, tugging at my grief, invoking Frank's name as a weapon. I described how Melissa had obtained a key she was never meant to have, how I had caught her on camera trying to unlock my doors. My voice was calm but firm, each word fueled by months of pain that I refused to swallow any longer. Melissa spat out her protests, insisting I was being unfair, that she had only been thinking of the family's future. But I didn't let her drown me out. For once, I refused to be silenced. Daniel finally spoke, his voice trembling. He admitted that Melissa had pushed him, that he had gone along because it felt easier than confronting her. He said he hadn't realized how far things had gone until it was too late. But as he spoke, I saw the truth in his eyes. He knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough to understand. And he had chosen to stand beside her anyway. The weight of years pressed against me. All the times I had bitten my tongue for the sake of peace. All the compromises I had made to keep harmony. That day, I let it go. I spoke with a clarity I hadn't known I possessed, reclaiming my voice after a lifetime of quiet sacrifice. For the first time in a long while, I felt the solid ground beneath my feet, and I knew I would never give it up again. The day I carried the last of my boxes into the Victorian house, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting the quiet wash over me. This time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. Each room, freshly painted and glowing with light, held no shadows of manipulation, only the promise of peace. I moved in alone, but I was never truly lonely. The neighbors came by with flowers, with warm casseroles, with invitations to join their book club or walk in the evenings. A young couple down the street brought their children to play in the yard, their laughter drifting through the open windows. Slowly, I began to see that family can be found in unexpected places, not just through blood, but through kindness freely given. Daniel and I are taking careful steps toward reconciliation. He calls once a week now, his voice quieter, his words more deliberate. There are still wounds that haven't healed, and perhaps never fully will. Melissa keeps her distance, and maybe that's for the best. I don't close the door entirely, but I've learned that keeping my boundaries isn't cruelty, it's survival. Looking back, I see how close I came to giving everything away. Not just the house or the money, but my dignity, my voice, my right to choose my own life. Standing firm wasn't easy. It meant facing the people I loved most and admitting they had hurt me. But in reclaiming my ground, I found something I thought I had lost forever myself. Now, when I sit on the porch in the evening, the sun casting long shadows across the garden, I feel a quiet pride. I didn't let betrayal define me. I chose to rise, to plant new roots, to rebuild not just a house, but a life that is mine to protect. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Boundaries are not walls to shut others out, but doors we learn to guard carefully, so that only those who respect us can come through. If you've ever faced betrayal or had to stand firm to protect your dignity, I would love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, because your voice matters too. And if this story touched you, please like and share it. You never know who might need the reminder that it's never too late to take back control of your life.